So adolescence, Erickson separates early childhood from adolescence by talking about this time period as being approximately like 12 to 18. And identity and intimacy are the big ones that show up here. And in part because, puberty begins. It's impacting both the brain and our physicality, right? Like our bodies and our brains are massively influenced by this. And so questions of identity really come up, like, who am I? And intimacy, who am I in relationship to other people? These are big questions that get answered during this time period, or at least get asked a lot during this time period. And so who are the people in our lives? Like, are we allowed to be who we are? Are we allowed to rest into our identity and who we're going to be in relationship with, like, society around us and culture? Are there people we can trust, right? It goes back to that early concept of trust, but are there people that we can have intimate relationships with, really share our hearts with, or our bodies, right? These are the kinds of things that are big questions when we're teenagers. And who those people end up being, what the answers end up being, these are all going to, again, impact our type. And our type is going to impact how the environment responds to us and answers those questions for us. So in early childhood, you can see why so much is there at the early phase, 0 to 11, trust, autonomy, initiative, industry. There's constant growth and constant changes between 0 and 11. It's just, that is the norm of that time period.
Yeah.
When you get into adolescence, the fact that puberty starts taking over and massively impacts your mind and your body simultaneously in all these crazy hormonal ways. And it tells you to come online to your relationship to the outside world, right? What is your marketplace value in the crudest terms I can think of, right? That's pretty crude, but it's like, am I going to be able to mate?
Biologically, what's your value biologically? Who can you mate with is really the unconscious question every teenager's asking.
Yeah, and constantly. It's hard to get that thought out of your head. It's like sometimes I get to listen to music and sometimes I get to play video games, but most of the time I'm just thinking about that and my little social ecosystem. So it's fewer things are imprinted during that time period, but those are still really big. And early adulthood. Well, and by the way, during this time period, gender roles are very influential during this time period. In fact, it might be the most influential to our cognitive development. Our friend Dario says that up into the age of 25, gender, it has some of the biggest impact on how types show up in
EEG brain scans.
That's right, exactly. And you can kind of tell, the difference between, say, a female ENFP brain and a male ENFP brain. But after 25, it stops. So during this time period, gender roles, gender, sort of how we respond and react to all of that, it's very influential in these kinds of components.
Well, and that would make sense because chemicals and hormones affect a lot of things about personality type that we've understood, especially in the recent past. We've been aware of different chemicals speak to maybe a person's subtype, how they show up with a little flavoring of their type based on the chemicals that are overwhelming their brain. Yeah,
which neurotransmitters do we have a tendency to be more sort of associated with? And two of those, based on the work of Dr. Helen Fisher, is testosterone and estrogen. So yeah, it's very influential.